Young players that could see extended playing time versus Colgate. Plus, Syracuse football 2027 recruiting is off to a hot start. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts, whether you're watching Locked On Syracuse right now on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite audio platform. On today's show, later on, we're going to talk some football recruiting because Syracuse in the class of 2027, yes, I know it's a long ways away, but it's off to a hot start for now, and we'll discuss why that matters for Syracuse football. That's coming up later on in the show. But first, we're going to discuss some young players who could see significant playing time tomorrow night against Colgate, and we'll start by talking about the quarterback position. We know that Steve Angeli is going to be the starting quarterback. Could we see Rickie Collins? Maybe someone beyond that, a Luke Carney, a Rich Belling, Jakari Williams. We'll discuss that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. Now, before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. As we have discussed on this show for the past few days, and I apologize for no podcast yesterday, but as we've been discussing on this channel, this is one of those days for Syracuse football where it's as close as you can get to a quote-unquote free win. For context, Syracuse football, when they played Holy Cross last year, that was their one FCS opponent on the schedule. They did not play well in that game. Kyle McCord was in the game in the fourth quarter because the game was within 3 scores. But having said all of that, they won that game by 28 points. It's one of those contests where if Syracuse, and we'll discuss this later on today, that if they don't win by a significant margin, that is pretty concerning for this team moving forward. But ideally, the starters begin the game for Syracuse. They pummel Colgate pretty early. Then Fran Brown can make a bunch of different substitutions, and we get to see a bunch of young players. And let's talk about the quarterback situation for Syracuse for tomorrow night. Again, Steve Angeli is going to start for Syracuse football in all likelihood. And also, I think it's safe to say that Steve Angeli will play at least a half versus Colgate tomorrow night. But ideally, mid-third quarter, late third quarter, Steve Angeli is pulled from this game because, well, you want him healthy and ready to go for the following week when Syracuse has to take on the Clemson Tigers. And if Syracuse is dominating Colgate by a significant margin, at that point, you don't need your starting quarterback to finish out the game. So, assuming that Steve Angeli at some point in time tomorrow gets pulled, we will in all likelihood see backup quarterback Rickie Collins for the very first time in a Syracuse uniform. Rickie Collins is a redshirt sophomore that transferred to Syracuse back in December and was initially named Syracuse's starting quarterback ahead of their spring game. But unfortunately for us Syracuse fans, he was injured for that spring game. So we did not get to even see him throw a pass for Syracuse football during a team scrimmage, if you want to call it that way. I mean, it is the spring game. It is very competitive, but at the end of the day, it's Syracuse going up against Syracuse. We didn't even get to see Rickie Collins in that one. The only footage we have of Rickie Collins in college is him attempting 7 passes for his entire career while he was at LSU. Yes, we've seen some practice footage and people have spoken about Rickie Collins and how he was really neck and neck with Steve Angeli, but we really don't have much on Rickie Collins other than people's word and maybe a few practice videos you see out there here and there. So tomorrow night could be the very first time we get to see Rickie Collins in a Syracuse uniform. And I'm excited to see it. And comment your thoughts in the comments section below if you are also excited to see Rickie Collins in action. See what Syracuse has in their backup quarterback, because knock on wood, hopefully nothing happens to Steve Angeli, right? For some context here, last time Syracuse played Colgate was season opener of 2023. I understand it was a completely different regime. It was different players across the board, different quarterback and everything. The starting quarterback at the time, for those that don't know, was Garrett Schrader. Garrett Schrader, in that 59-0 win, he played the whole first half. He played the first drive of the third quarter, then was taken out. Carlos Del Rio Wilson, the backup, finished out that game. It's also possible for Syracuse to play more than two quarterbacks in this one. You start with Steve Angeli, then you go to Rickie Collins. Maybe you see what he can do for a couple of drives. And then if you're Syracuse football, this is entirely up to them, obviously, you could decide to play another young quarterback, whether it's redshirt freshman Jackson Williams, a 2024 three-star recruit. There's also the two true freshman quarterbacks that Syracuse brought in the class of 2025, whether it's Luke Carney or it's Rich Bellin. Alabama, this past week, when they were playing against UL Monroe, I believe, they played three quarterbacks in that game. So it is not unheard of for teams to use not one, not two, but three quarterbacks when they are completely dominating a game. And honestly, this is the strategy I prefer with Syracuse football, because Colgate is a nice, soft landing for all of these quarterbacks. Yes, priority number one is to go out and win the game. That's why last year Kyle McCord was in the game in the fourth quarter against Holy Cross. But we know, based on actions, that Fran Brown was probably wanting to pull Kyle McCord sooner in favor of Michael Johnson Jr. because he eventually turned to Michael Johnson Jr. It was just later than probably what he wanted. The game was within 3 scores. If you're Syracuse, you pull Steve Angeli, then you put in Rickie Collins, let him cook for a couple of drives, and then give one of the other young quarterbacks just an opportunity to get their feet wet in college football. Jackson Williams, Luke Carney, Rich Bellin, they have not yet attempted a pass in an actual game for Syracuse football. Yes, they played in the Syracuse spring game, but did not play up against other competition. Colgate, FCS opponent, nice soft landing for all of these quarterbacks involved. How many quarterbacks do you think we'll see tomorrow night against Colgate? And are you excited to see more than just Steve Angeli potentially in this one? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, coming up, other young players that we could see get significant playing time tomorrow night against Colgate, including the running back position. Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP. Who delivered? Powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. And for Syracuse last week, big comeback against UConn, and there's really only 2 or 3 options to consider here. Steve Angeli was a candidate. Antoine Delorier, the linebacker, was a candidate. I'm going to go with Justice Ross Simmons with 2 late receiving touchdowns in this game, led Syracuse to a comeback victory over UConn. When the pressure was on, Justice Ross Simmons came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching Syracuse football over the past couple of seasons, this performance by Justice Ross Simmons was no fluke. He had a couple touchdowns in the comeback win in 2024 against Virginia Tech, does the same thing against UConn last week. Also, leads Syracuse football so far in 2025. I get it's been a young season, but he leads the team in targets thus far. And just like Justice Ross Simmons delivered for Syracuse, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Let's go over more young players that could see extended playing time versus Colgate. We already hit on the quarterback position. Now let's talk about the running back position for Syracuse football, because this is something that's developing right now, which is that Yasin Willis, Syracuse's starting running back over the past couple of weeks to begin the season, is most likely not going to play tomorrow night with an injury, according to head coach Fran Brown. He said that on Syracuse Sports Talk. He did say that he hopes to have Yasin Willis back for the following week when Syracuse takes on Clemson. That's going to be a big one. Hopefully all hands on deck for that one. Either Clemson is going to be 1-2 with their season on the line, or they're going to be 2-1 with new hope, feeling very confident in themselves for the rest of the year. No matter what, Clemson going to be a very tough game. Obviously, if any player is a little bit dinged up, this is kind of the week where you would want to give them a little break. Syracuse football should be able to handle Colgate no problem, even without starting running back Yasin Willis. But with Yasin Willis most likely being out, that opens up the opportunity for plenty of running backs to see the field in this matchup. I imagine that Will Nixon will step in. He's a veteran, and he'll be the primary running back for Syracuse to begin this game. But we've already seen a couple of other running backs get on the field a little bit. Malachi James, Jaden Hart, those are redshirt freshmen for Syracuse football. I imagine that we're going to see a lot of those players, or a lot of carries from those players in this game versus Colgate tomorrow night. Plus, there's also a couple of other true freshmen like Malachi Coleman that could get on the field for Syracuse. If all goes according to plan, I would expect that Syracuse uses at least 3 running backs, possibly 4 or more versus Colgate. That would be ideal. Get everyone on the field you possibly can. This is the perfect opportunity for plenty of young players to get extended playing time, because you never know when you might need them. And you never know what could happen from these games. Speaking of the running back position, remember LaQuint Allen? His first flash was really that 90-yard run he had against Wagner in 2022. We're like, who's this LaQuint Allen guy? He looks pretty promising. Look at that run he just had. Lo and behold, we see him perform in the bowl game later on in the season, and then become Syracuse's starting running back over the next couple of years. So you never know. You might as well play some young players in this game versus Colgate, including the running back position with no Yasin Willis. Then there's tight end and linebacker Jamie Tremble. Jamie Tremble, it's really fascinating with him because Syracuse is kind of making him play a different position. It's sort of weird. They're having him play both ways. Let's just put it that way. He's a tight end, but they are making him a linebacker as well. Now, Tremble did see the field versus Tennessee both ways. He was a tight end and a linebacker. The linebacker part was completely unexpected. That was not a storyline heading into the year that they were moving Jamie Tremble's position. That was something that happened behind the scenes, and it was a big surprise for all of us when he was actually on the field on defense for Syracuse versus Tennessee. But then Jamie Tremble did not play versus UConn, and I don't think it was because of any sort of injury that he suffered against Tennessee, although that could potentially be it. You never know what guys are dealing with behind the scenes, the nicks and bruises. Maybe he just wasn't up to being able to play. But that's not really what I read about Jamie Tremble. Now, Fran Brown was asked about Tremble specifically in his weekly press conference, and to summarize it for you, Fran Brown did say that Tremble is going to play tomorrow night versus Colgate, and this is 100% the correct move, because as the theme of the show has been, this is a soft landing for everyone. This is your chance to see what you got, throw darts at the dartboard, no pun intended with dart, and see what you got in all your players. So, hey, let's see Jamie Tremble at linebacker. Let's see Jamie Tremble more at tight end. My only question with Jamie Tremble, and Fran Brown sort of answered it, but not really in specifics in his press conference this week, is why did Jamie Tremble play in week 1 versus Tennessee and not week 2 versus UConn? I'm just asking a question, and you can give your thoughts in the comments section below to it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know more about developing football players than Fran Brown, and I am certainly not going to suggest that either. I just find it a little bit curious that he's going to play in week 1 versus Tennessee, which is the tougher opponent, no doubt, but he's not going to play against UConn. He didn't really get into specifics. I just find it interesting. Again, I'm not going to sit here and suggest I know anything more than, I don't know more than Fran Brown. Okay. I just wanted to throw that out there to you. It's a little bit odd with Jamie Tremble. Then you got Kaylib Singleton. Kaylib Singleton is a 2025 4-star or 3-star, I believe a cornerback or defensive back, depending on the major recruiting service that you decide to use. And he was one of Syracuse's highest rated players in the 2025 recruiting class. Now, unless I am mistaken, I don't believe Kaylib Singleton yet has seen any snaps on defense. And a reminder to you all about true freshmen. True freshmen get to play in 4 games in college football before they have to burn their red shirt. Meaning Kaylib Singleton could play the entire game versus Colgate, and he still keeps another year of eligibility. He could play in 3 more after that if Syracuse decides to use him in that way. And unless Singleton is hurt or the game is tighter than it should be, he should 100% be on the field for Syracuse on defense in this game. Also, for what it's worth, Fran Brown, in the same breath where he said that Yasin Willis was most likely not going to play, Devin Grant, Syracuse's starting safety, is also most likely not going to play for the Orange tomorrow night versus Colgate. Yes, Devin Grant's a safety. Kaylib Singleton's more, I believe, a corner. Regardless, just thought that would be worth mentioning. That's one of Syracuse's starters that's out. Maybe there's some sort of position switch, whatever, something behind the scenes that we don't know about. But they're both defensive backs. Should be worth monitoring that Devin Grant is not most likely not going to play. Maybe that means more snaps for a guy like Kaylib Singleton in this game. And finally, I'm going to bring up a player, but not in the way you might expect. Demetrius Samuel Jr. Hold up, Jackson. Demetrius Samuel Jr. is the #1 cornerback of Syracuse football right now. We've seen him on the field versus Tennessee. We've seen him on the field plenty versus UConn. Why are you bringing him up? Well, for those that may have forgotten, and it's easy to forget right now, Demetrius Samuel is technically a 2-way player. We just had that whole discussion about Jamie Tremble being now a 2-way player. Demetrius Samuel Jr. was a 2-way player that we actually knew about going into the 2025 season. He can play wide receiver, and he obviously can play corner. Now, so far this year, I've watched every play of Syracuse so far. I don't recall seeing Demetrius Samuel Jr. on the field one time for an offensive snap. I could be wrong. I could have totally missed it. You could sit there in the comments section right now and say, hey, Jackson, I found multiple plays where he was used and you missed it flat out. But I don't believe I have. But again, feel free to fact check me in the comments section below here. Now, to be fair to Fran Brown and Syracuse, they did say that Demetrius Samuel Jr. is a defensive back first for Syracuse football, and that they may not use him on offense as much as we may expect. It's really going to depend on the situation and what the team needs, I believe was the exact verbiage behind all that. Well, this is Colgate. You might one day have to use Demetrius Samuel on offense, or at least you might want to use Demetrius Samuel on offense. Maybe you throw him out there versus Colgate. The theme of the show has been what? This is a soft landing. This is a game where Syracuse should dominate from start to finish. Demetrius Samuel is a 2-way player. eventually he's probably going to get snaps on offense, unless you decide not to use him on offense ever. That could be in the cards. But why not? Let's see him on the field on offense for just a little bit. I'm not sitting here saying he's got to play an entire half of offense, but how about for a drive or two? We see Demetrius Samuel, or just a few plays sprinkled in here and there. The only real counter behind that argument that I just made, and I'll acknowledge it right now, is you have to be careful about what you put on tape because other teams are watching. And if they see Demetrius Samuel Jr. being used on offense and they see the type of plays that Syracuse is running, well, if you're the Clemson Tigers and you're Dabo Swinney, you might want to pay attention. Because if they can use him on offense versus Colgate and it goes well, Syracuse might feel compelled to use him in the Clemson game or other games. And the point is, once you start putting tape on, once you start putting film out there, teams are going to be able to pick up on it, and they're going to get a better idea of how to stop a guy like Demetrius Samuel. So I totally acknowledge that argument. I just think that there is a happy medium there where you can get him some on-field offense snaps without having to actually divulge any real secrets that are out there, any different ways that you might use Demetrius Samuel. So maybe don't use him in trick plays. You could throw him a slant, though. Why not? Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. What other young players do you want to see versus Colgate tomorrow night? Love your comments in the comment section below. Now, coming up, a 2027 football recruiting update. It's off to a hot start. Stick with me here on Locked On Syracuse. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel is quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays, or just take your mind off the fact that the New York Jets still stink. I'm a New York Jets fan saying this. So are you ready to play over on FanDuel? Well, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Syracuse football 2027 recruiting is off to a hot start. The Orange recently added 2 more players to its 2027 class, and we're going to dive into both of them in just a moment. But first, a couple of quick disclaimers here. And it's a classic case of 2 things can be true, because I know that we're talking about the 2027 recruiting class, so I already can kind of predict what some of you are going to say. Because you know what? This is not my first podcast here on Locked On Syracuse. So number 1, I acknowledge that this is very early, that this is the class of 2027. These guys cannot theoretically sign with Syracuse football, or actually sign with Syracuse football, I should say, until December of 2026. We're currently in September of 2025. That is a year and a half from now until these guys can potentially sign. I know that these are verbal commitments, and verbal commitments at the end of the day are not signed paperwork. It is just a verbal commitment. Okay? I acknowledge that. But also, verbal commitments, especially in the Fran Brown era, are not meaningless. Syracuse football, much more often than not with Fran Brown, have been able to hang on to their verbal commitments. And we've done plenty of podcasts, especially over the offseason, documenting how under Fran Brown with Syracuse football, if you leave out the 2024 class, if you just talk about the 2025 one, it's about 90%. Reason why 2024 is weird is because that's skewed due to a head coaching change where a lot of guys are going to decommit than otherwise would because you build a relationship with the previous coaching staff. Then there's a new coaching staff that comes in, causes a lot of guys to decommit and go elsewhere. Relationships. That's one of the most important pillars of football recruiting and recruiting in general in college sports. But this is not meaningless. First off, let's acknowledge that I think we would all rather have the verbal commitment than not have the verbal commitment. So I'll take the verbal commitment, even if at the end of the day, it's just a verbal one. And number two, in the same breath where I say, look, 2027, it's a long ways away until these guys can sign. Let's also acknowledge this, that in December, most, if not all, of Syracuse's 2026 recruiting class is going to sign. And once those players put pen to paper and they sign with Syracuse, as well as plenty of players around the country signing with their respective schools, then what? We're going to be talking about the class of 2027. So even though it's early, it may not be as early as you might think. In other words, it gets late early in recruiting. With that being said, let's go over the two most recent commits of Syracuse football, both happening within the past 48 hours. Number one, you got Davion Crumity. I apologize for any name mispronunciation. He is 5'11", 160 pounds, an athlete from Florida, currently rated as a 3-star prospect, but he is the 21st best athlete in the country per Rivals industry ratings, and he is also rated as a top 400 player overall on 24/7 Sports. So this is a very high-end 3-star, could maybe become a 4-star pretty soon. He chose Syracuse over Georgia Tech, Pitt, UCF, and Illinois. Then you got Tristan Hughes, who also is a pretty highly rated prospect. We'll get to that in just a moment because the rating for him on 24/7 Sports just came out for Tristan Hughes. 6'1", 190-pound athlete from Ohio, rated as the 32nd best athlete in the country per 24/7 Sports, and also a top 400 player overall in the country over on that site. He chose Syracuse over Bowling Green, Mass, Eastern Michigan, Kent State, Miami, Ohio, and Toledo. I imagine for Tristan Hughes, he's going to be getting a lot more offers over the next few months and possibly over the next year. So let's wrap up 2027 football recruiting and how it's off to a hot start here. Syracuse, according to 24/7 Sports, they have 6 commits in their 2027 recruiting class. You got Stanley Montgomery, Travis Miles, Davion Crumity, Tank White, Justin Dixon, and Tristan Hughes. All 6 of these players are rated top 500 in the country per Rivals industry ratings. For some context behind that, Syracuse in their 2026 recruiting class, which was a very strong recruiting class, the strongest of the Fran Brown era so far, they had 5 players in the top 500. Well, Syracuse in 2027, they already have 6. They are 6 for 6 getting top 500 players over on Rivals industry ratings. So 2027 football recruiting is off to a nice start. Yes, it's early, but it's off to a pretty good start. And you'd rather get off to a good start than a poor start, right? Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you think it's a big deal that Syracuse is off to a good start, or it's no big deal in your opinion? Comment in the comments section below. Now, as far as what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future, later on tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, we will have Poll Friday on Thursday this week. What is an acceptable outcome for Friday's matchup versus Colgate? And speaking of Colgate and the matchup, well, tomorrow, Syracuse and Colgate at 7 p.m. Eastern, there will be a full post-game reaction podcast. So that's what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future. Thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And for your second listen, feel free to check out a couple of our shows. You can check out Locked On ACC and Locked On College Football as well. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, Be sure to hit subscribe and tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse, and I will see you all again soon.